Hello and welcome to seminar number 4, Logic and Emotion, the Brain and the Heart. My name is Carla Fisher and I'm in Student Success Services. I hope that you will enjoy this seminar. Let's go ahead and get started. The way I want to go ahead and start about this is to go ahead and break down some of the understandings that we have about the human brain. We're going to talk about logic, but I think that usually we think of things being brain related, so I thought that would be a good place to start. What I'm going to share with you is that pay attention to this first slide because we'll be talking about it in different ways throughout the seminar. Let's go ahead and look at the many different ways that our brain works. Obviously, we know that it is the computer of our body. All right. So, for instance, this brainstem, simple basic things that we need to do on a pretty regular basis. Temporal lobe, your hearing. Frontal lobe, your judgment, your foresight, and your voluntary movement. How many of you already knew that? That is an important piece, and I want you to pay attention, especially for that. Okay? The temporal lobe, your intellectual and emotional functions. Okay? Notice I'm covering the frontal and temporal lobe. Pay attention for those two, because we'll be talking much more so about those. The occipital lobe, yep, you need that to see, obviously, as you're seeing this seminar. So all of these play an important part in your education and in your life in general, okay? But in order to be able to really understand what's going on when you are studying or going ahead and being a student, things like the parietal lobe, which is the comprehension of language, speech comprehension, which is Wernicke's area. Again, the temporal lobe. The frontal lobe is important. Speech, obviously, when you're communicating with others, some form of speech is important. The Broca's area. All of these play a key role in how we go about our daily lives, how we interact with people. I want to share with you some interesting facts just because when I was doing this research, I found that, sometimes little things like this can mean a lot, especially when you're playing trivia. So, for instance, did you know that your brain after the age of 30 shrinks 0.25% in mass each year? Okay. So what I want to help you understand is that does not mean that you do not have the brain capacity. Merely what happens is the physiological, anatomical piece that is your brain shrinks. So just think about it like with some elderly person that is in your life. You've noticed over the years that they've decreased in size, perhaps. They've shrunk. Well, that's the same thing that happens with the mass, which is called your brain. Does not mean that you cannot be as intelligent. There are other factors that can play into that. That could be because of dis-ease. That could be because of damages to your brain because of injuries. That could be because of the fact that maybe you've had one too many drinks. So many different things that can go on. The energy used by the brain is enough to light a 25-watt light bulb. Pretty powerful stuff that way. The left hemisphere of the brain has 186 million more neurons than the right side. So that is helpful probably when you're considering how you go about processing information and the understanding that, wow, there's a lot more neurons available to me there. The brain uses 20 to 30% of the body's energy. Now that might not seem to really matter. However, when you think about it and you're feeling tired, where is it that you're going to have the most difficulty in functioning is probably in your thought system, in the ability to be cognitive in what you're doing. Like with the student that I saw today, He was very tired, and therefore he wasn't very clear in his speech. He was trying to stay awake and aware. You know, he had just let me know that he was with me today, but his wife had just had a baby earlier on. But because of the fact that his brain uses so much energy and he cannot necessarily give more because of his tiredness, he's unable to necessarily speak in the way he would like to. So just being aware that your brain needs a lot of energy in order to function. Emotional intelligence. Any of you guys out there know or understand or have an awareness of emotional intelligence? I'm sure a few of you have. I'm sure a few of you have actually had some type of use with it. And basically what it means here, in simple form, it's being aware of the importance of feelings and behaving wisely. Simply put, basically, okay? There's 3 different things that help in that, but the 2 biggest ones are the neocortex, which we had called the frontal lobe, remember that? Which is your impulse control, your better judgment, your people skills, your languaging, your logic, and your conscious awareness. Remember, that's in the front area of the brain, okay? As I point to it, thinking that you're seeing what I'm pointing to. Then the next piece is the limbic system. Your emotions, your gut feelings, your memory, okay? Between those 2, what you get, therefore, is a feedback loop, okay? Why the brainstem is part of that is because that's your basic reflexes. That is how, you know, you are able to breathe and all that. And obviously, in order to have these other things function, you need to have your brainstem hopefully be intact as well. So when looking at emotional intelligence, they have found that when they did the research on this, because obviously it's not as developed in theory and all of that as the IQ, all right? But some people came upon this and decided that, wait a minute, this is valid, this matters. This is something that needs to be researched. And what they came upon was, where did this stem from? Wow, okay, the neocortex and the limbic system. These are the things that we have to look at because of how people relate to one another, okay? How they are when they behave with others, how they might feel about something. You know, it's really important to pay attention to that because you might not realize, but you are working with people, whether it be online, face-to-face, or even interrelating, I should say, with people. Could be your family, you know, friends. But when you have some understanding of your emotional intelligence, it'll benefit you to be able to interrelate, once again, to other people, okay? With that being said, I want to go to the next slide on emotional intelligence. There's a free EI test that's online. And again, this is free, so it might not be as accurate as you would like, you know. And you can go to a psychologist who does that type of testing and have testing done to find out what your emotional intelligence is. And I'll cover more on what different pieces of emotional intelligence look like. But with this, it's a free thing. You can sort of get an idea. So I welcome you to go ahead and try that. Emotional intelligence consists of 4 core abilities, okay? Really quickly looking over them, as you can see, I've got them all interconnected, okay? You've got self-awareness, you've got self-management, then self-awareness goes into social awareness, self-management goes into relationship management, so does your social awareness, and from there you get some results. And when I mean results, again, when you're interacting and having interface with people, you're going to have some type of result. Sometimes in a positive way, at other times not so positive. Okay? So with self-awareness, as you can see here, it's an understanding of what feelings you might be having. You recognize them. One of the things in my career, I have done counseling. In the state of Florida here, I am a licensed mental health counselor. And it was really interesting to have this as a consciousness when working with people. Having watched people, excuse me, not always be aware of their feelings. They go through emotions, but they wouldn't be able to always identify them. Whether they be young or older, having the not being able to understand what type of experience they were having emotionally. Therefore, they weren't always self-aware. Then we had those clients who were hyper-aware, and every emotion they could identify and they could let me know about. You know, so both can be an extreme in some ways. Self-management. When one has an awareness of their own emotions. Okay, so for instance, you know, I'm feeling elated. Maybe it's not the best idea to go around and go through a mall screaming and saying, I'm so happy, everybody has to be happy. Learning that maybe I have to be more contained about that. You know, so maybe just doing it in my car, in my very small confined area. You know, people around me will think I'm crazy as I'm screaming with my hands up in the air, but, you know, at least I'm in my car. But again, learning when and how to go ahead and express and also behave from that experience of the emotion. Okay? Social awareness. Again, let's go back to that whole thing about being happy. I'm aware of my feeling. What you have to be aware of is, like, when you are experiencing emotion, you're dealing with other people on the whole, okay? Even if it's an online platform, okay? So it's being conscious of how you feel, and then also, therefore, picking up other people's experience or feelings. You might be in a setting where there's a number of people, and maybe you guys have all experienced this in some way. And you're noticing that, you know, the vibe is kind of off. You're not exactly sure, but you can feel it. That's the social awareness that comes with that. Okay? Or you can sense that people are excited. You know, movies do really good with the way that they do sound and light and all of that to get people to have that experience of feeling the actor as they're portraying something. Okay, so it's going outward in your life experience of emotions. Okay, relationship. It's the ability to develop and maintain good relationships. Okay, this I think is well defined in a negative way, and I haven't seen it, but I've heard that it's funny. A movie called Horrible Bosses, in which they discuss, and it was interesting because it was a student who brought this to my awareness, that there are some bosses that apparently in the movie, and some of you are shaking your heads and remembering scenes from the movie, so good. But they discuss, or they show and portray bosses that have no understanding of anybody else but themselves. So if I recall from hearing from a student telling me about a dentist, and I believe it was played by Jennifer Aniston, and she apparently didn't know good boundaries with her employees, and that caused some difficulty. And with that, you know, apparently there was some, I'm going to say, some willingness to do some unkind things back to these people. But because of their inability to be able to relate, to be able to communicate, and all that, therefore, they showed a poor example of relationship management. Okay, so when I say that, I bring that up because it's not only within our world of our own personal world, but in our world that is work related, in which we're interfacing with people. You will then be able to see who you are relating with, how they're relating to you, how you might be feeling, how they might be feeling, and then also being able to see what is the best way to go about managing being in relationship with that person. So not only looking at how you might feel, but having an understanding of how they might feel and taking that into play when working in that type of environment. Okay? Because it's not only, and this could be even in a household, you know, you're a parent of, let's say, 10 kids. Okay? You have to figure out, Johnny might react differently than Susie. You have to figure out how to work with them. Even though they're all your children, they all have, and I'm sure those of you who have children are getting what I'm saying on that, because I have kids, very different personalities, have to handle them sometimes differently, you know, but again, it's the understanding of how to do that. So remember I had mentioned with the first slide of the brain about the frontal lobe. It's also called the prefrontal cortex, that front area, as you can see in blue highlighting there. Okay, what are some of the things that this PFC provides? Well, as you can see, there's about 6 really cool things. It provides you with an awareness of your emotions. So this is where that happens. Your impulse control. Should I go ahead and do something? Should I not? Awareness of choices. Okay. Ability to plan ahead, to understand what consequences might be involved. Again, these are things that hopefully as we grow, we get to be better at doing. Your emotional intelligence. Remember the feedback loop. Remember that was part of that. And better judgment. Again, that was mentioned in the very first slide. And if you want, you can slide up to that. Well, excuse my pun, but you can go ahead and see that one again. But all of this stems from that one central area in the brain. What's important to note here, okay, is that with this, the prefrontal cortex is not fully reliable until your 20s. So for those of you who might be in your early 20s, you can take a deep sigh of relief. Okay, so maybe I'll use that as an excuse. Hopefully you won't, but as an excuse for why I behaved the way I did. You know, I wasn't very aware that if I did this, it would happen, this would occur, or, ooh, I shouldn't have flick that person off in the other vehicle because now they're tailgating me, or whatever it might be. Now, this does not mean that as you get older, you might not have moments of going there, but I think that we can all agree you tend to find yourself mellowing and not having as much of that when you are in your 30s and up. Now, let me go ahead and clarify something, because students have brought this to my awareness, and that is that, you know, they know people that are in their 40s or 50s or whatever, and they don't always have this going on. And yes, that can be the case, okay? But let's consider too that there's environment that's a piece of that there's personality that's also a piece of that. And there's also sometimes a brain injury, a traumatic brain injury, okay, that can cause one to not behave always in the best of how they could be, all right? Because if you recall back when you were younger, let's go to middle school, because I have a middle schooler right now, but I also, when was working as a full-time counselor, noticed that my middle schoolers, they didn't have this stuff going on. In fact, you know, when one of my students went ahead and was involved in a fight, she went ahead when the principal was trying to break it up, went ahead and without even thinking, punched the principal. Oops, not a good idea. Yeah, she wasn't invited back to that school. But anyways, because of that, you know, I mean, not that that gives excuse at all, but that's an understanding of what happens. The interesting thing too with the prefrontal cortex is once you have it where it's more reliable, okay, so your emotional intelligence, as stated here, is much more attuned. You're able to really get, okay, so this is how I'm feeling. This is how other people might be. This is how I'm going to contain myself. You know, this is how I want to relate when I'm in a setting where I have to be managing, let's say, myself, but maybe others in this scenario. So, your emotions. How can they help you? Well, they're a very important piece to helping you see your truth, okay? And yet, it does not mean that they control you. As you can see here with my red light, I will stop and think before speaking and before taking action. What I want to explain further on that is that we humans have emotions. That's, well, I shouldn't say just humans. I mean, animals, period. We have emotions, all right? What I have seen and heard from people is the concept that frequently our emotions rule us. And what I would like to emphasize is your emotions are there. They're there for reasons, but they are not there to control you or how you behave. Your behavior is separate from that. And that's why it is important to sometimes stop and be logical and think about it, because you've got these emotions going on. So for instance, you're in a situation and you feel angry and you want to go ahead and maybe scream at somebody or punch a wall or something that might not be the most effective in that experience. If you even take a few seconds to go ahead and stop and think about what you're doing, you can change the way the outcome might be. Okay? Now, I'm going to repeat that because I think it's a really important thing to remember. You can stop and you can think. And I've had students say, but how is that feasible, Carla? Sometimes I'm in the middle of something and I can't, and I just say it. Okay, true. But try it as an exercise. You know, maybe later on today, tonight, maybe tomorrow, maybe in a week, if you can remember this, to when you're having some type of emotion, whether it be positive or negative, but normally when having to really stop and think, it is what we consider, quote, a negative emotion, like anger, to stop and think and go ahead and say, okay, how's this going to best benefit me with using this anger? One of the things I want to say with that is emotions are neither negative or positive. And notice I said that before, that is a positive or negative emotion, because that's how we look at emotions. Emotions are just that, emotions. And I bet if you had to right now, you could write down a list of emotions. And what I've seen occur over and over with people is when I've said that to them, they write down all of what we consider negative emotions. When I worked with people in counseling, the interesting thing that I paid attention to, especially middle schoolers, they had two emotions that they were most familiar with. One was that they felt angry or they were completely in love. what I want to remind you is, and if you need to, go ahead and Google it, you know, and get up all the emoticons you can. But there's a vast, vast world of emotions. And sometimes we limit ourselves to having just maybe 5 in our repertoire of being able to express. Okay? So when you're having an emotion, doesn't mean that you have to go with the emotion. Just means, wait a minute, this is here. This is here for me to look at. And I need to stop and pay attention to it. And it can be even one of those that's a good one that we consider, which is happiness. Well, I am full of joy. Well, again, what might be appropriate at that moment when experiencing joy. So your goal is to be aware of your feelings and then to control your behavior. Okay, so as a simple mantra, you could say to yourself, my goal is to be aware, and I'll be okay with that if you use that as your mantra, by the way. My goal is to be aware of my feelings and then to control my behavior. I will choose to respond to my feelings wisely. I will choose to respond to my feelings wisely. And I think that's something that really could help and benefit all of us. I had a situation this past weekend where I was in I can't even remember now, which is good. It's called Halftimers when you start forgetting things. But where I had feelings going on, and I remember my husband reminding me, hey, wait a minute, you do not have to go ahead and do something because you're having a feeling. And the funny thing, he hasn't taken this seminar, but he's good at stuff like that. Anyways, and so I kind of, you know, got mad under my breath, but, you know, he was right. And fortunately, because of his reminding me, wait a minute, I have this feeling, I don't have to do anything with it right now. I was able to sit on it, and when I was better able to, I went ahead, okay, so it was with one of my kids. I was better able to handle the situation. Okay. It wasn't really that major a deal, but it was homework related. And so being aware that, okay, so for a parent it is a big deal. But anyways, it was being aware that I didn't have to go ahead and yell or scream or shame or any of that, but just rather maybe find a way to come up with a solution that would benefit my child. Okay. So again, making a conscious choice about that. One of the things that I remember, and I cannot, you know, draw, and I didn't want a slide on it because I draw it and I think it's just a lovely drawing, but is a volcano. Okay. Interesting thing about a volcano, what do we normally see? We see the top layer, right? The lava coming out, the heat, you know, the steam or whatever it might be. We forget that there's a base to that. And that base is pretty solid and it is a large area. What I want you to consider is this. With human emotions, what I have seen over and over is that that base, sometimes, what I forgot to say is, let's consider that picture in your head of a volcano and the bottom portion of the foundation being an emotion. And that emotion is frequently hurt. The top area, which is the predominant area that we look at, that we pay attention for, is anger. And so what I want to share with you is when we are experiencing anger, which has frequently been an emotion that most of us can at least even verbally identify. And I think a lot of us can go ahead and say, we felt angry. If you really break it down and look at the foundation, the layering of what causes one to feel angry, it's a hurt feeling. So your best friend is having a party for a mutual friend. and they've been talking to you about it, they've been planning it and whatever, and they've been sending out invites, and for whatever reason, oops, they didn't send you one. Okay? Well, you're pretty angry about this. I mean, how dare they? You know, we're friends, all of us. I mean, what? Am I chopped liver? Why am I not getting this? I don't understand, you know? And you might even be not so kind with that person. Well, I don't want to go to your stupid party. I have something better to do. Like the old adage, I have to do my hair. Okay, so it's old, I get it. But anyway, so with that, if somebody were to really look at it and pay attention, they'd be like, what am I really feeling here? Wow, I'm feeling hurt. And that they could actually maybe even verbalize that to this person. Hey, what happened? I didn't get an, and they could make it, you know, like, hey, what happened? I didn't get an invite. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Because sometimes what we picture to be there really isn't there. So going, oh man, you know, because you've been such a part of this, it slipped my mind. But of course you're a part of it. Right there, instead of going to a place of anger, also being aware to go ahead and be aware of the feelings, to not behave, to not say something that might be more damaging, to really pay attention to that. We, as human beings, we tend to go ahead and be reactive and not be responsive in the way that we approach things. Sometimes it's just walking away from a situation for even a second to go ahead and get our bearings and to be able to feel like we know how we need to handle something. Try it. You might find it to be helpful. The heart. No, I don't talk about all the different areas like I did the brain, because truly that is much more information than I think you might want to have at this time. However, I do want to indicate that yes, it is a very important piece, just like the brain. What's interesting about the heart is the blood flow, right? It's your main vehicle to get that liquid that keeps us going, moving throughout your body. People tend to think of it in a almost symbolic way when thinking about emotions. And as we stated, hey, look, emotions and the experience of emotions and judgment and all that, that comes from the brain. But I will let you know that the heart is also a very important piece to that as well. There is well, I think it was a great documentary, and I always forget the person's name, but it's called I Am. He's the gentleman who did Ace Ventura. You guys probably recall him in that way. Anyways, he goes and he talks about different pieces of, I guess, you know, being a human being. And one of the things he does is he does research with a place in California called HeartMath, I believe it was called. And they have come to find that actually the heart really does play an integral part in how we go about processing our life experience. So it's not only about pumping the blood, but if you think about it, when one is feeling elated, or let's say when you're feeling elated, where are you going to feel that in your body? You're right, the chest. When you have had some type of tragedy, excuse me, some type of loss, where do you experience that in your body? Right again, the heart. It's a very important piece in connecting with what goes on emotionally. So be aware that though you might think, oh, it just pumps blood. No, they have found that there really is chemicals that are released from the heart area when going through different experiences in life. So what is cognitive dissonance and why am I talking about it? No, I didn't spend tons of time talking about the heart, but what I want to talk about is something that is very much a part of the heart, and that is here, as you can see, if I'm feeling uncomfortable with my PFC, so my prefrontal cortex, my logic and all that. But my gut, my heart, my limbic system also is part of that, but my actual heart is telling me something different. What's going on there? And sometimes in that discomfort, you're needing to be aware to pay attention and look at something, okay? That discomfort that goes on isn't just to cause you angst, you know, it is to actually give you some insight into something. Cognitive dissonance, can I describe it in a more life-based format? Well, let's do a simple one of going to the grocery store to the produce section. You see a bag of grapes. I want some grapes. You know, but I don't know if I want the green grapes or the red grapes. So, and some of you are smiling because you know what I'm about to say. You open up the bag, you pull out a grape, and you go ahead and put it in your mouth. Now, I learned this through my children, and I stopped long ago. Because when I did that, my kids are like, "Mom, you're stealing!" And I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm testing the grapes so we can see if they're good to take home." Well, my kids were right. I knew what I was doing was not okay. Fortunately, they got my back. They were my consciousness, which they frequently are, and had me be aware of that. Okay? So that's one example of cognitive dissonance. Having this discomfort going on, but not being sure why it's there. Okay? The next one that I would share with you is you know you want to buy a car. You're looking, but you're not necessarily planning on buying immediately. Go to car lot. Really convincing salesperson talks to you. You keep telling him, no, I'm not interested. 4 hours later, you're driving off the lot with a new car. That is something that also is considered cognitive dissonance, not having those two things connect. So it's really important to have it be matched, to be able to look at those two. One of the things that somebody recently shared with me that I thought was brilliant, and we all do it, you know, well, more so probably when we were kids, is you flip a coin to see who's going to get heads or tails to get the ice cream. Sometimes you might do that in life decisions. One of the things they said with that, and yes, I know about the stats and all that with flipping a coin, but if you flip a coin and you go ahead and that whatever you, let's say, decide, so let's say you decided on heads, and what came up was, let's say, tails. But when that happened, your gut, your heart area, was saying something different. Maybe that's what you need to go with, and going with that feeling. Even though it might have been indicating something that you should have been, that on the coin said to do, but that gut feeling was telling you something. That's maybe what you want to pay attention more with. So, okay, an example, really silly one, but again, one to look at. Flip the coin. Should I have ice cream or should I have ice cream and a piece of cake? Heads, ice cream. Tails, piece of cake and ice cream. Flip the coin. Goes to tails. Says ice cream and cake. Hey, we got it there. Know what's going on. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? That doesn't feel right. I know that that's not the right thing to do for myself right now. Doctor's already told me, and or whatever. But it's because of that cognitive dissonance that it goes on there. You know what you need to do. That's the most effective thing for you at that time. Try it. It couldn't hurt. So what are you going to listen to? You're going to listen to your feelings or your thoughts, or are you maybe going to join them and have them do this lovely dance, as this picture shows, of using both. And I hope you can use both, and you can make it so that your choices can be logical in some ways, and also it can be something that causes goodness, wellness, happiness, joy, whatever, when you take that approach, when you're willing to look at both of them. What's wrong with squashing your feelings? Well, when you do that, you dull your awareness of all your other feelings. Isn't it interesting when we try to suppress or keep down a feeling, we're still going to have it, you know, but we're not allowing other feelings to come up too. I've seen that a lot in counseling. Somebody's like, I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. I don't feel that way. And then they have something occur and all these different feelings come up. So it's really important to look at it. When you're not willing to look at stuff, guess what? It makes it harder to figure out things in life, to take care of things. Okay? The feelings are always going to be there. Again, it's just a part of being an animal. Okay? A human. It's a part of all that existence. So to be aware that you have them so that you can therefore take care of whatever might be going on for you. The art of problem solving. Why am I having this when I'm talking about logic and emotion? Because frequently in our lives, we have certain situations come up where our logic and emotion might not be on the same page. And we have to pay attention for it. And sometimes these questions, if you want, you can use this when you're dealing with something. What am I feeling? What's causing this feeling? Do I want to go ahead and react to it or just let it be? And if I react, and reacting, remember, is just, you know, sort of boom, you do it instead of thinking about it. Not always the best choice. So if I do choose to react, how can I go ahead and improve the situation? I'm going to cover the very last portion now. Something that sometimes people don't want to talk about, but it's that romantic piece with logic and emotion. Because, well, sometimes logic is definitely thrown out the window at first. Okay? Sometimes you wake up and go, oh my God, what did I do? Why did I have that Las Vegas wedding? I've only known you for 2 days. Again, being silly with that. But what occurs is when you have that sort of incredible feeling, that place in your heart where it's overjoyed, there is a chemical that's released called phenylethylamine. Say that 10 times fast. Or PEA. And it makes you have that high, that experience of being in love. Okay? Sexual activity can obviously also help release that neurotransmitter. That pleasure neurotransmitter, okay? And that's where you have to be really careful of being aware of your logic and emotion. Yeah, I'm not saying not to enjoy it. Totally enjoy it. Sometimes when you are not aware and you allow yourself to not be logical, that could cause a hindrance too. Okay, so there's a balance in that. Now, here I've talked about phenylethylamine. PEA. Can it change who we are when we're experiencing that? Absolutely. Have you ever noticed some people who are having that PEA thing going on, that they might be kinder, they might be warmer, they might actually be more talkative, they might be more attentive? I'm sure you can think in your past of somebody you're like, oh my God, yeah, I remember when, or you yourself were that way. It's really interesting how that pleasure neurotransmitter can really cause this huge natural high. So, what happens with this is PEA does fade, I'm sorry to say. And I've had students argue with me on that, which is always very interesting when they do. Usually, they're under 25 years of age. And what they try to let me know is like, no. In my relationship, which has only been 6 months, I know that my PEA is not going to fade. I'm so in love. Okay. Sorry to say, guys, usually after about 2 years, it does transform. It does change. Okay. Not something I have made up. This has been studied and researched. Go ahead and look on it yourself. What comes out of that, though, are 2 other neurotransmitters called vasopressin and oxytocin. For those of you who have nursed a child or who know somebody who's nursed a child, one of the chemicals that are released when nursing is oxytocin. No, I'm not saying that you're going to have that experience, the same experience with a love relationship, but that is a neurotransmitter that is released, and so is vasopressin. Now, these replace PE, the phenylethamine. And it's a good thing, because what happens is you still get to continue having the experience of feeling connected to somebody. And one of the ways is sexual activity can also stimulate those. Okay? Long-term relationships do not, and I know it's going to break a lot of people's thought system, so here I go, are not Hollywood. Okay? When you are in a relationship for a long time, and I say this because, well, I've been in a relationship for a good almost 20 years now with my husband. And it does change. I remember being crazy about him. And then getting the awareness that life continued to happen, but I still had a deep connection with him. It wasn't like I did at first, but it became much deeper, much richer. And that is what occurs when you have been in relationship with somebody. And again, it's usually 2 years. Sometimes it can be shorter, sometimes it can be longer. So that is just, again, an average. So will our infatuation grow into real love? And I kind of squirm at that because I know some people don't like that, but yes, it can. And the way it can, don't you like my little hands there with the heart? The way it can is if you like each other still. You know, basically have a mutual liking for one another. If your basic needs are being met, period, you know, hey, you've got housing, you've got food, you've got, you know, companionship, or, you know, somebody there who is nurturing in some way to you. And I don't mean nurturing in the sense of always, but, you know, somebody who, you know, is there to be with you. In a positive way, let's say. If you have figured out a way to go ahead and problem solve, if both people have been willing to be in this setup called a relationship and take care of things. Sometimes it is identifying what one feels. I've seen so many times with counseling with couples that they will express themselves in an angry way. Really what goes on is they're hurt. Okay? So sometimes being aware of that and learning how to problem solve things that can be small as, well, what shall we eat for dinner together, which is can be big in some households, or what type of car are we going to buy? But figuring out how to take care of stuff. Doing it as a unit. And the last one on that is remembering to somehow show appreciation for the person that you're with. Doesn't have to be major, but even just maybe giving them a big old hug. For those of you who are having that urge to give somebody a hug, find your loved one and give them a big old squeeze. And just let them know, hey, I really appreciate you in my life. You know, my husband just did that with me about a week ago. Out of the blue, he came into my office and brought me a Christmas cactus, and if you've seen those and you see how they bloom, it's lovely. And I'm so glad that he did that for me. And it's just because he wanted to show his appreciation. Yes, I did do something nice for him. I cooked him a very nice dinner. Okay, just so you know. All right, well, that concludes this seminar. I know that I haven't covered everything about logic and emotion. There really is so much more that can be covered, but hopefully I've given you enough sort of tastes of the different things that you can go ahead and maybe research yourself. There's tons of great articles, books on how to go ahead and really develop more of your emotional intelligence. Or, you know, go ahead and start having that cognitive dissonance work for you as opposed to you. Okay? And I invite you to go ahead and do that. Thank you so much, and have a blessed day.